This is Dream Power Radio, the place where your dreams turn into reality. Here is your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Hello, and welcome to Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network powered by Raven International. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, the Dream Coach. This is the show where we talk about dreams, both daytime and nighttime dreams, and how you can use them to make the internal shift to a life you love. And as a reminder, I'm here to help you understand your dreams. So if you have a dream that's got you stumped, send it to me at debbie@dreampowerradio.com. I'll help you interpret your dream or answer any general questions you may have about the importance of dreams. So you can email me at debbie@dreampowerradio.com. We talk a lot about dreams on this show, but I don't often focus a lot on what it means to be living your dream life. For me, that means somebody who embraces life and is fully self-expressed. My guest today is one of these people. Joan Gelfand is a poet and author whose reviews, stories, and poetry have appeared in over 100 national and international literary magazines. Her books include Here and Abroad and The Long Blue Room, among others. Welcome to Dream Power Radio, Joan.
Thank you, Debbie. Glad to be here.
Great. So, Joan, you're a movie star now, right?
An accidental. You know when people say an accidental? Yes, an accidental.
Okay. What I mean by that is that your poem, The Ferlinghetti School of Poetics, was made into a short film by Dana Walden and is now a big hit on the festival circuit. So why don't you tell us about it?
So, as you've said, I'm a working poet. I've been a working poet since, many years, since really my high school and college days. And I started to publish and get very, very serious about my poetry. And I think I was on my second book. I was working on my second book. And I had a series of dreams about Lawrence Ferlinghetti. The first one was, as it says in the poem, I was just in North Beach, where he has his famous City Lights bookstore. And then there was another one, and this is like months later, where I was telling a small child, and this is also in the poem, you gotta go to the Ferlinghetti School. It's totally rad and completely cool. And that line is in the poem. So that was a dream. So now I'm starting to think, what's going on with Lawrence Ferlinghetti, right? The third one, I'm in a movie theater. And after the third one, oh, I didn't even think about that. I'm in a movie theater and the poem gets made into a movie. Debbie, I never thought about that. Okay, so in the third one, I'm in a movie theater. Here comes Lawrence Ferlinghetti. So after that, I said, okay, I have to craft, I'm a poet and I use my dreams. I have many poems that have come from dreams. This one turned out to be kind of epic. People resonated with it so deeply. It won a mayor's award from the city of San Francisco. It was published about 6 times at least, and won in a French journal where it won an award. I mean, it just really made a hit. And so Kelly Sullivan Walden and I were hosting a monthly radio show called Dreams to Art. And what we did is we would interview artists that were using their dreams or had used their dreams to inform whatever their art practice was. Well, on one of those shows, Kelly asked me to read the Ferlinghetti poem, and her husband heard it. And he said, we got to make a movie out of this poem. And I was hesitant because he wanted me to be in it. That was not my idea of fun. I don't know how you feel about being in public in that way. Anyway, I went to LA. We did the whole thing. He had a studio with a green screen. We went to Santa Cruz to kind of be a facsimile of Coney Island, which is in the dream. And Dana and Kelly came to San Francisco, to North Beach, where some of the poem took place. Well, he really made some really fabulous footage, and he's an amazing filmmaker, as you know, very talented. So we submitted, and this is like maybe well over 3 years ago, probably 4 summers ago. We submit it, and it immediately gets into this poetry, this International Poetry Film Festival. Well, of course, that's a great place for it to be. And I think it got into maybe one other film festival, and it showed at the Beat Museum, and we put it up on YouTube, and it got a lot of hits on YouTube. All of a sudden, 3 years later, now you also know I coach writers, so I always tell them this story because it's so interesting about how time has no bearing on whether your work will be successful. 3 years later, I get a email from the Hollywood International Film Festival. I had applied to them 3 years ago. We want your film. Literally, it was like dominoes. The London Film Festival, Austria, Rome, Cannes, I can't even tell you. There's 9 of them altogether. Malta. So Dana and I start to go, what's happening here? Well, of course, it was Lawrence Ferlinghetti's 100th birthday. We didn't make the film for that reason, but of course, the film festivals who want to appear erudite, now they have a film made by a poet that celebrates Lawrence, that they can say is for Lawrence Ferlinghetti's 100th birthday. Anyway, it's been fabulous. And the upcoming one is going to be in November at the World Film Festival in Los Angeles. And they want Dana and I to speak. So that really is a big step up too, because everybody's like, oh, are you going to Cannes? Are you going to Rome? Well, no, they didn't send me a ticket. Anyway, that's the story of this little, I'm going to write a blog post, the little film that could. It's 4 minutes. It's 4 minutes. And Dana also filmed one of the most fabulous scenes is, we filmed at Beyond Baroque, the art center in Venice, California. And we had a full house, and this was really fabulous. So that's in the film too. So yeah, we should give people the link that they can go on my Joan Gelfand YouTube channel, and it's right there on the homepage.
Very
good.
Good.
Watch it for minutes.
Yeah, I had actually seen the film when Dana was still putting it together, and it was in its rough form. And I was struck about how what you wrote translates so visually. Did that surprise you?
I tend to be a very visual writer. My novels, people say, are cinematic. I don't mean to do that, but I think I'm very visual. I love the visual arts, and I write about the visual arts a lot. So, I think this poem really did lend itself to a visual interpretation. Yes, it's definitely not language poetry.
Uh-huh.
It really plays to a narrative. Yeah.
Right. And you had said that, the ideas for the poem came from your dreams, and that a lot of your poems come to you through your dreams. Do you intentionally ask for your dreams to create the poems, or how do they happen?
Never. I have never asked for a poem in a dream. I just have had probably 15, 20 experiences where I wake up and I have imagery that is so strong that I know it has to be a poem. And as I told Kelly when we were working on our show, and we've also given talks on this topic of dreams to art. We're thinking of writing a book on this because it's so interesting. On your topic of dreams, what I think is so interesting about this is that I think when you use something that comes from that dream world in the physical world, it has a potency that people resonate with. I have to say that those are some of my poems that people feel most strongly about, the poems that came from dreams. And I think it's because it's this gift from our dream life, from our subconscious, from the beyond, from another world. I mean, I'll let you talk about it, but
Well, can you give me an example of another one of your poems that come from a dream?
I have a poem in my first book called Burial. Debbie, this dream was so visual. I literally woke up, wrote it down. That was it. I don't think I ever changed it. It was a dream about being buried, and that I had no fear, and that an angel chanted. And I had to write about that. So that's a short but very potent poem. And that's the last poem in my first book, which is called Seeking Center.
So valuable. The dream world is so valuable to us when we pay attention to it. It gives us so many gifts. For you, it's the gift of poetry.
I've heard music. I've seen the Buddha and the Dalai Lama, and had all kinds of very encouraging dreams, and things that have really helped me work out problems. I've always been an active dreamer, since childhood, actually. But as I became a teenager and older, I start to write down. And of course, now knowing Kelly and all you guys, I take them so seriously and I analyze them. But with poetry, you don't really have to analyze them. You just take the imagery. Yeah.
And you just work with it. Absolutely.
You work with it. Yeah.
So what kind of advice do you have for people who have their dreams and want to make them into art? How do they start?
What we talk about in our workshops, Kelly and I gave a really great workshop at the International Association for the Study of Dreams. We're looking to do the workshop around. What we tell people is, you've got this raw imagery, but you have to make it work as a piece of art. It's kind of like James Cameron had, apparently, the movie Avatar came to him all in a dream. But it's not just like bugs on a page, it's art. There's color, there's energy, there's music. It's the same thing with a poem. You have the raw material. Like, okay, I just told you about that dream burial. Here's an image, I'm being buried and an angel chanted, but I had to create some drama in a poem, right? I had to create a narrative arc. And it's the same thing for people trying to take those raw images. You still have to use artistic principles. If it's film, you're in a narrative, right? If you're in a poem, you want to use language in a creative way. You don't want to just plop the image down in the middle of the page and say, oh, it was a dream, so I guess now it's a poem. No, you still have to use the basic principles of that creative discipline. If it's a piece of music, maybe you can transcribe it exactly. I've had dreams about music, but I don't know how to transcribe, so there it goes. But if a musician had a piece of music, Paul McCartney got songs from dreams. Well, he transcribed them. But I would say my biggest piece of advice is know what discipline you're working in. If you're working as a writer, then you have to use some creative writing principles. If you're working as a filmmaker, you're going to have to use some, whatever those creative, I'm not a filmmaker, I don't know. But, whatever those creative principles are, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And no, it's so true that, dreams do give you insights and inspiration. But unless you're very lucky or fortunate to have something totally downloaded to you in your dream, you still have to do the work. You still have to apply what you've got.
Exactly. These 3 dreams,
It's
totally. These 3 dreams, I could have forgotten about them, right? But after the 3rd one, I said, I think I'm getting a strong message here, right? Like something's happening. Yeah.
So you better do something about it. Well, on that
Better
note, we're going to take a short break here. We're talking with poet Joan Gelfand about poetry and dreams, and we'll be right back. What do Thomas Jefferson, Elias Howe, and Paul McCartney have in common? They all understood the value of dreams, and as a result, the ideas, inventions, and creations from their dreams affect us to this day. What great ideas are you leaving on your pillow at night? Sign up for a complimentary consultation at my website, thedreamcoach.net, and discover why your dreams are a terrible thing to waste.
Welcome back to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Yes, welcome back to Dream Power Radio. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, the Dream Coach, and we're talking with poet Joan Gelfand about poetry and creativity and dreams. So, Joan, when did you start writing poems?
I'd say high school was my first foray. Very shy, not convinced. And when I moved to Berkeley, it was right before I went to college. And I happened to fall in with some feminist artists. And that was really pivotal because they kind of insisted that I take my poetry seriously, that it was good, that there was a there. And so I started to give readings and publish and definitely take my work more seriously. But if I tell you that I still have piles of scratched poems lost in every corner of my office, yeah, I still have organizational problems. But I started to write early. And by the time I was in my early 20s, a band had taken a poem of mine and recorded it. So I was kind of on the songwriting scene a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So,
in fact, now this is very cute. A musician found another poem of mine from my last book of poems, and he composed a very serious score to that piece. And so I'm very excited to have that performed, I think, later this month with a singer and a pianist. And I guess I'll get to be the guest of honor.
that would be really
I
cool.
love it.
So did you ever think about just becoming a songwriter?
Debbie, I am such a purist. But to my own detriment, right? I'm like, my mother was like, why don't you write advertising copy? Go be a songwriter. I never had, I say I'm a purist, but I also never had the confidence that I could come up with work on demand, right? My poetry was something that I was engaged in an artistic process, but I didn't think I had a well of, anyway, I just didn't, I could never see working in the creative writing. It was, for me, it was kind of a magical experience that happened for me. And I wanted to stay in that magical experience. Do you know what I mean? Like, so many writers I know, once they go to work as a writer, they're not interested in writing at home. And I think they lose that magical relationship. And then it becomes a burden, right? Because they have to earn their living from it.
Mm-hmm. So when did you realize that you could call yourself a poet?
I think when I was in my early 20s and people were like, I want to publish that. That's really outrageous. That's great. Oh, I want to record that poem as a song. That song played on the air nationally. So, then I started to say, oh, okay, I guess I'm a poet. And I never stopped. I always worked at a, normal corporate job, and poetry was always with me. And then I got the chance to write full time, and then things kind of went on turbo, because then I had the energy to start to publish. It was fine to write, and if someone asked me to publish, I would publish, but I never had the energy to put a manuscript together. I had a child, I was working, that kind of thing. But then I got an opportunity to do this full time. And that's when I started to put the books together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So getting back to actually poetry.
It's not a high paying job, Debbie. Tell your, you can tell your audience, that sounds like fun, but no, it's not money in the bank. It's a passion.
It is. Well,
how many musicians go out and perform and they love it and they can't live without it? But, if you ask them if they made $500, over the course of their lifetime, maybe they did, maybe they didn't,
Yeah, but it does make your soul sing.
It's a soul discipline. I met Kelly, I've expanded my world in tremendous ways. Yeah, tremendous. And that first book that was published, the way that you go from being kind of like an aspiring to being a published author, crossing over, is tremendous. People are like, oh, published author. Oh, you're over on this side now. We'll ask you to do this. We'll ask you to speak, read, talk, whatever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I wanted to ask you about poetry itself. What can you do with a poem that you can't do with, like, say, a short story?
We talk about this a lot because I taught poetry to children, and I talk about poetry a lot, in these kind of discussions like I'm having with you. Poetry is a distillation of a moment, right? It's not trying to tell you this whole story from 5 years long, or an epic, that goes for 150 years. It's a moment. It's a moment. And the best example of that is like a Zen haiku, right? 17 syllables, 3 lines. But that moment, to me, it's like a breath of fresh air. It places you in something deeply. And I always say, people say they don't like poetry and they have no use for poetry. But when someone in their family dies, or they get married, or they have a baby, or there's a tragedy in the country, like we've had plenty, guess what? People turn to poetry because they're in that intense emotional state, and they want that distilled intensity. And that's what poetry gives us. 9/11, books came out of people's reactions to 9/11. In the financial crisis, I had a poem in a book of that someone put together. In fact, she just won a Guggenheim. 99 poems for the 99%. Poets' response to the economic collapse that we had in 2008. I mean, there are times when people really, it's solace. That's the word. It's really, like I said, someone dies, you get married, people want poetry.
Because it's very powerful.
It's powerful.
The way that you could use few words to create deep emotions it is a true art form, and that you're able to do it is just marvelous. I want to change the subject a little bit. You took a step away from poetry to write a book called You Can Be a Winning Writer, with the subtitle, The 4 C's System to Author Success. What made you decide to write this book?
It didn't come in a dream. But it was something that started to, I don't know if you've ever written a book, but a lot of people who write a book, it's like an itch that you have to scratch, right? You start to get this message about, this theory that you feel is unusual that you want to bring out into the world. What happened to me was I had a BA, I had an MFA. When I decided to become a professional writer, I had to learn the ropes. of publishing and becoming a working writer all by myself. I hadn't learned any of this in any of my school programs. So I said, this is time to tell aspiring writers what it really takes to get published, what it really takes to get your name out there. These are things that in school, they didn't have time for. They're getting a little bit better about it now because so many students are clamoring for it. But basically, I felt like I had spent maybe 5 to 10 years after I decided to become a professional writer, figuring out the ropes. And I thought, well, this is a gift. I will give this back to the writing community, what I've learned. And what the subtitle of that book is: Craft, Commitment, Community, and Confidence. And it's what's unusual about this book is that a lot of people talk about, and if you go on any Barnes and Noble, Amazon, any online bookstore, or walk into one, you will see the business of writing, how to get your work from your desk published. And there is a business, but the business can't be done without the support of a community and without the writer's confidence. So I think I kind of took an approach that was unusual, more feminine in a way. It's not just the business of writing. You have to deal with your own demons. You have to deal with your own self-limitations and self-sabotage. If I tell you how many talented writers I meet that can't get their work either from the head to the desk or from the desk to the book, numerous, talented, so talented.
Oh, look, I understand. I mean, I've written a lot of books, and there was a 20-year period when I got burnt out and stopped writing. So, it's not just putting words on a paper and getting them sold. There's a whole process. So, kudos to you for helping others and giving back what you've learned so that others can learn from that. I also understand that you've written a novel that's about to come out. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, this novel has had an epic life. I started it a long time ago. It takes place in a Silicon Valley startup. Of course, by the time it comes out, people may be so disgusted with Silicon Valley, but I'm trying to time it at a time when there may be some interest. And it's a lot about danger and risk and socioeconomic opportunities and women in tech and a lot of metaphors about, how games inform our life. The startup is involved with extreme sports, which has always drawn my attention. I've always been fascinated by people who engage in, surfing, skateboarding, snowboarding, skiing, all of that. So, base jumping. So yeah, so it'll be interesting. I have a publisher. It's scheduled for late February, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, well, I'll be looking for it when it comes out. So Joan, we're almost out of time. So my final question to you is, how can people find out more about you and about your work?
My website is easy to find. It's just joangelfand.com. I also happen to be the only Joan Gelfand in this country who is engaged in a literary life. I think there's 2 other Joan Gelfands, but they don't live in San Francisco. My website talks about my coaching. I do some travel writing. It shows the movie. This little poetry movie is on there. And about the new book, about the writing book, and all my other books. Yeah. Thank you so much, Debbie.
Oh, well, thank you, Joan, for being with us. We've been talking with poet Joan Gelfand about the creative experience. I'm Debbie Spector-Weissman, and I hope you've enjoyed the program. Until next time, sweet dreams, everybody.
You've been listening to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman. For more information on Debbie or to sign up for her newsletter, go to dreampowerradio.com. This has been Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network, powered by Raven International.